Well, hello. It is Friday afternoon, which means it's time for Half-Formed Thoughts with Half Decent Studio. Hey, Murray, how are you?
I'm awesome, Rosie. How's your day going?
Yeah, pretty good, except I just said it's Friday afternoon, but we publish these on Wednesdays. So for anyone watching,
It's all right. I think in a post-COVID world, pretty much everyone's just going to be used to the fact that, we're living in this asymmetric, text message, yeah. Zoom recorded, post-published world, right?
It is someday at some time somewhere. And that is all of 2020 and 2021 to me.
and I think, for all its downside, maybe that will be COVID's greatest gift, is helping us all realize that not everything in TV is published immediately after it's created. Hey, you always come up with great ideas for us to talk about, and I thought I might surprise you with something today, which we talk about a lot, and you have probably helped me work through more than most. But I just found an interesting little insight that came up in my walk earlier today. So I have, for whatever reason, recently committed to reading or listening to an audiobook by the infamous ex-salt military guy, Jocko Willink, a book called Extreme Ownership. And sure, I'm only 2 chapters in. But one thing that jumped out at me in almost the opening, it was this long disclaimer that he and his co-author seem to write, which is it seems to leave a window open to what the culture must be like, even at the absolute highest, most elite level soldiers, whereby they said, who are we to write a book on leadership? Who are we? Surely people who write books about leadership must be the epitome of leaders. They must be the greatest. They must, have never made any mistakes. We've had trouble with negativity surrounding. We struggle to back former SEAL team leaders or even military people who write books and share their stories, because we feel like that should be our thing. And yet we've gone ahead and done it. We've pushed through that and put it out there. And I thought that was just a really interesting, because we often talk about the idea of imposter syndrome and tall poppy syndrome as, I wouldn't say uniquely Australian and Kiwi changes, but I think they are reasonably tied and quite deep in our culture. And I thought it might be a good opportunity. I was really intrigued at the idea that even Navy SEALs are trying to bring each other down and bring themselves down. And that got me thinking, gee, we've come so far, not just you and I, but lots and lots of people in the past 12 months. And we've been supporting and helping lots of people push out their first project or their first big side project. And one of the inevitable parts of that is always imposter syndrome. Who am I to write this blog post? Who am I to have an opinion about X? Why would anyone give a shit what I think about anything? And you seem to have found interesting, clever ways of pushing through that, through a mix of process and not half-formed thoughts, but fully formed thoughts. And I thought today might be as good an opportunity as any to share some of what helps you get through that. And I'm just going to grab the dog. I'm not leaving. I'm just going to stop her from making lots of noise.
No, go
Please,
for it.
Talk.
I will. And might I say, that is a lovely trampoline you've got there, friend.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Oh my gosh, AirPods. It means you sound the same even when you're... Oh, hello. Hello, puppy.
This is Toffee.
Oh my gosh,
and,
this is all we're going to do.
She's not ours. We are... No, I'm just going to give her a cuddle so she doesn't make too much noise.
No worries.
And then I'm back.
Yeah, so to your question, firstly, like I think it is a naturally Aussie sort of Kiwi thing to do the tall poppy syndrome thing, which is like we cut down people who are a bit too big for their boots. But I think
Oh, hello.
it's just going to be this one of these. I think one of the imposter syndrome is just really common across the board. Like, I just don't think that's a cultural thing. I think it's just like sort of how it plays out, right? Like, whether it is we cut ourselves down or we expect other people to be cutting us down and stuff like that. You asked how I seem to get around it. Look, I think at some point you got to argue for the other side of the. You got to argue for the other side. If you're constantly hearing this argument of like you're not that good, or like what right do you have to talk about this, or I have no idea what I'm talking about. Like, we very rarely argue for the other side of that argument, right? Like, you know, we rarely ask ourselves, what do I know? What do I have a breadth of experience in? What could go right? You know, how could this piece of information that I'm trying to put together here actually help someone? You know, and then, you know, that's the mindset side of things. But then also like looking for the evidence for the good as well as the you know, we're constantly like on guard for criticism, and we're surprised when people are like, man, that was super helpful, right? Like, there was an Instagram message that someone sent to me one day after I'd put out a video, and I clung to that for months. I still cling to that when I'm feeling like really bad about myself. I'll look at this message and be like, you know what, you know, even if what I'm putting out today is just going to help one person, then that's kind of enough, right? So keeping those evidences around, but also if it's going to be an argument either way, if I'm going to struggle to do it or not do it, which would I rather have ended up with, having done it or not, right? So like if it's going to suck either way, may as well do it. Which,
yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if that works for everyone, but it kind of works for me.
And I think I just remembered, you know, something that we had discussed previously, which really worked for me. It might have even been on our last conversation, was around the idea that certainly for me, I now feel somewhat, I've looked at it from the other side, as in those who have come before me, those who have published before me, those who have pushed through the fear before me. And I now feel even more of a debt of gratitude and a sense of duty towards them, to think, well, I might see someone who has published lots, or, you know, been prolific, or, you know, has said something really clever or made something incredibly beautiful, as more talented or more progressed down their path than what I feel. But it's all just perspective, right? Like me putting out something and us putting this out with all its noise and with all the, you know, interruptions and all that stuff, it's not pretty, but that might be just exactly what someone else needs to see or hear before they go, you know what, fuck it, I'm just going to press go and push it out there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I mean, I know you're a designer by trade, but I'm not. I've always been substance over form. Like, don't get me wrong, if the form is really, really great, it can carry the substance a lot better. We could produce this a bit better. It might make a difference. But if we overproduced it and then didn't show up and have interesting conversations about real things, no amount of production is going to make up for that. And so that's always been my game, right? Like, can I say one thing that cuts through to one person? And I keep trying, and sometimes I get it right, sometimes I don't. But it's
funny, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
how that can put some people off, like even by bringing yourself down a peg, or by, you know, in this case, I mean, I could completely understand as a designer, as a visual aesthetic, you know, sort of driven person, to look at this video and just go, well, it's not as polished as it could or should be, therefore it is less valuable. And I you know, I completely understand that perspective. And yet sometimes, like I said before, sometimes this is just the only thing that gets the message across in the way that you need it. It's like, oh man, like if those guys can produce such beautiful work and yet have such ugly, boring, conversations in normal places. Oh wait, maybe I, we're not having ugly conversations. You get my point.
I think it's also, there's so many things to unpack in this, but firstly, we won't get to a really well produced, really well planned out, really clean thing unless we do this version first. Because if we went for that first, it would be a behemoth to pull forward. Whereas this, I feel like this weekly rhythm is sort of starting to get easier, and so we can up the game, right?
Yeah, well
and that will
said.
come eventually. The other thing I'll say is the reason as a designer you make things pretty and you make things on brand is so that trust can be implied, right? The people who will get value out of this probably aren't complete strangers. They're probably people who are already subscribed to your channel, or they're people who will get sent things. I've sent you, what was it, like a 2-hour-long training that was a paid training by someone who was basically like, sitting in her rumpus room teaching live to camera. And it was one of the most useful things you ever did. But if I hadn't recommended that and you hadn't seen a really great, well-designed sales page or had that like sort of premium experience, if you had seen just the video on its own, there's not a lot of trust implied by that setting. So, we're doing the content first. Maybe one day I'll go back through this. We'll edit out all of the ums, the ahs, the background noise. We'll top and tail it with some really fancy graphics and whatever, and then it will have the packaging. But for now, it's going out to a few trusted people who maybe will get something out of it.
Right on. That is a lovely way to wrap up. I really, really like that this one was rough, ready, and a bit ugly. That's awesome.
Oh, thank you. All right, I'll talk to you next time. Maybe somewhere quiet.
See you guys. Bye.